Shift gears a little bit. Speaking of beating Republicans, Nathan Fletcher became the lone Democrat on the board this time around by beating longtime San Diego DA, establishment Republican Bonnie DeMantis. Now, he campaigned on the need for change. What impact would you say Fletcher's had?
So I think immediately the big thing we've seen is there's certainly a lot more conversation going on. And obviously, action-wise, you've seen the board do things that I think were rather unimaginable even just a few years ago between, on behalf of asylum seekers, community choice energy, which is something that Diane Jacob herself tried to push but couldn't even get a second on. Nathan Fletcher ended up being her backing for that. So you've seen a lot of different areas. He's also very involved with environmental health and air quality control.
And yeah, the asylum seekers is interesting because, as you touched on earlier, Kristen Gaspar had kind of been snuggling up to Donald Trump because they were joining this suit to kind of bash sanctuary cities.
Yeah, so I actually think that's one of those examples where I think most spectators, they kind of look at it as the big thing that kind of shows just how much and how dramatically the county has shifted. You know, a few years ago, they joined kind of after the fact a lawsuit on behalf of the Trump administration against California. This year, the board, is suing Trump and his administration for ending the so-called safe release policy of connecting asylum seekers to kind of their final destination.
180.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
180. Susan, I wanted to mention the story you had today about the county budget and they're beefing up funding for the mentally ill. I wanted to get into that.
Much of the $6.1 billion proposed budget will go toward mental health. There's a $50 million increase over last year proposed for the behavioral health services, and that money would go toward creating 177 more psychiatric beds, 100 and some more staff workers to work in the mental health, some of these psychiatric, hospitals and facilities. And then it would also, increase, walk-in services, the psychiatric emergency department response teams, PERT. So, yeah, just trying to get a handle on our growing number of people who are experiencing mental crises.
Right. A huge problem. And Charles, is this kind of move toward the progressive side of the political spectrum, is this reflecting a change in the county and the city of San Diego, which, as you say, Democrats, the registration numbers have gone up dramatically in recent years?
I think it's a combination. I think, one, obviously the departure of two longtime supervisors certainly changes the dynamic when you get fresh blood in there. I think also, with two other supervisors who are about to be termed out, they have a lot of things they want to get done, and I think that's made them far more aggressive in going after certain things. At the end of the day, though, the board does still have a conservative bent. I think that was on display just, a week or two ago when we had the vote on whether the county would back the police use of force bill that Assemblymember Shirley Weber is pursuing. They elected to oppose it, which I think kind of shows as much as things are changing, it's not like a total, they're by no means fully progressive.
Let's not get carried away.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about Jim Desmond, the other new face, a Republican here. A little more progressive action on his part than originally thought?
Yeah, so I think, one, he was one of the board members who voted for suing the Trump administration, which I think is something that probably surprised a lot of people. I think he certainly is fiscally conservative. He's very conscious of that. He's also a big advocate for things like opposing Sandag's new proposal that would gut some promised road projects that would have a big impact in North and East County. I don't think we can go so far as to say he's overly progressive, but I think he certainly seems more flexible than his predecessor.
And Gaspar herself, do you think she might be a little more repositioning of her approach with that election coming up?
So I think that's the thing we'll all be really watching closely. I'm not sure if there's really much wiggle room, just given that she's visited the White House, she's been photographed with Trump on multiple occasions. It's really hard to backtrack on that, especially because among the Republican base, backtracking on that, at least a certain portion of the Republican base, that's going to be unfavorably.
Now, if we were in the next election cycle to see the majority shift to Democrats on this board, we could really see some dramatic changes.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the long bet that people made a few years ago when you saw voters approve term limits, is that the kind of writing was on the wall that, oh, we can actually fully flip this board. You know, Nathan Fletcher may very well just be the precursor to something much bigger.
Right. All right. Just about out of time. They've got some money to work with, though. It's budget time, and they've had a lot of funds.
They do. So it's, you know, talked about a lot that they have $2 billion in reserves. Most of that is not immediately accessible or already allocated, but there is still money that they're tapping into. They tapped into it to build housing trust funds.
All right. We'll see how they